This podcast contains explicit content and is meant for entertainment purposes only. The opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect the views of VKH Press as a whole. Thanks for listening. This is VKH Breakdown.
I see tears in the evil eye. Looks like it's my last chance to say goodbye. My thoughts are filled with cyanide.
Hello.
What are the topics? Hello.
Wait, what? All right, let's start. Wait, what are the topics?
Yeah. Wait. Okay. Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to VKH Breakdown, episode 1. The very first one, not counting episode 0. We had a fun time last time, just kind of going with the flow. This episode, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to talk about the issues, like some important topics and stuff. I'm your host, Jeff DeWitt. With me, once again, is VKH site owner, Winona Peace,
Hello. Hello.
and fellow reviewer, James O'Brien.
Yo.
Yo.
Wow. So much filled up.
Yo, indeed. So, Winona, I think it's just going to be a trend of me starting the recording and just catching you off guard. Welcome to VKH Breakdown, where we humiliate our site owner at the beginning of every episode.
I guess it's the best way to do it. It'll make me look like I'm so unprepared all the time.
Please don't fire me.
Nah, I won't do that. Oof.
Okay, before we get into these topics, we just picked like a couple of big topics that we wanted to talk about just to kick off episode 1. But before we get into that, let's see what everyone's listening to. James, what have you been listening to?
I've been listening to the soundtrack for the new X Japan documentary because I'm reviewing it. And then I don't know, that somehow got me on a kick. I've been listening to the older band, Derlinger, however you want to say
Derlinger.
it. Yeah, Derlinger, and the sort of associated bands that they splintered off to before getting back together. So Body, Craze, Die and Cries. So just some older stuff, I guess.
Nice, some deep cuts.
Yeah.
How is the new soundtrack?
You know, it's interesting because a lot of it is live cuts. So it's, I guess I'm used to like watching like the DVD. So it's weird to have it sort of decontextualize in that and not have images of them doing things, you know, accompanying the sound.
Yeah. What are you guys' thoughts on like live albums and stuff like that? Is it ever something you've been able to get into?
Not well. For me, the closest thing to a live album I've heard was usually like Gilgamesh's Live Best, which was basically when they just re-recorded all of their best songs from shows, like the songs that fans like to hear performed.
Oh,
yeah.
I guess that has the spirit of a live album then, because it's like, you know.
Yeah, it's the same idea, just not exactly a live recorded album.
Yeah, there's not a lot for me.
It's interesting for me. I think that having gone to Visual Kei shows in Japan, a lot of the experience, at least some of the bands I saw, they talked for a pretty good chunk of time in between songs. And so it kind of, when you listen to a live album than of the Visual Kei band, there's a lot cut off, and you kind of feel that you're missing something that's establishing sort of the sense of participation between the audience and the band.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. And then too, just a lot of Visual K bands are indie, so the live houses are pretty small, and it makes for pretty wonky acoustics in live recordings sometimes. The treble can come up really high.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Wonky acoustics.
Yeah.
I remember. I don't know if you guys ever heard Miyavi's like live album from London. I think it was.
Yeah.
Oh, I have. I loved it.
You did.
It's pretty great.
I felt so bad for him. Like,
Really?
yeah, because like his voice, like he'd thrown his voice out completely, like right before that live, and so
Right.
like his voice is like just not is just completely gone on like the entire live album, and it's like a live album like in London, like it's like a big deal or whatever. I think a lot of people still liked it, but like if that had been, I don't know, if that had been me, like that, I would have been so frustrated. Like,
I think the worst though was there was a live 12012 or Ichini Zero Ichini DVD where the vocalist Miyawaki, I think Miyawaki Wataru, he had like tuberculosis, and he was like in pain, and I mean just like sweating profusely by the end of it, and his voice was just like going out. Yet they released it because it was the tour final. But I think he had to like be hauled off to the hospital like right after the show.
God.
So it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting DVD to watch, but I mean, on some of the songs, he can't hit any of the highs, and I don't know.
yeah, no, I get it, because it's like you want to perform, you know, still regardless. But man, that's just gotta be a frustrating situation all around. So
Yeah.
But cool. Winona, what have you been listening to?
I've been listening to a lot of the bands that we posted on our music tips on Twitter from Sophia, our other co-owner. I checked out Island more closely, and even though they have just the one song, I think that they have a lot going for them so far, even though they're really small, and I really recommend them to people. And also David, not part of our music tips, but he had put up one song on his website that is only available through a certain music code. But if you have him on like social media, he posted that code online.
Yeah.
And you should be able to download it pretty easily. It sounds really good. It's a really good quality song, especially since he's on, Chateau Agency, Kamisho's company. So it's pretty expected.
Oh, cool.
But it basically sounds like when Kamisho went solo, but not when Kamisho went solo.
Yeah.
It's a totally different person.
Yeah.
It's really good.
No, totally. So I know Island's got that mini album out, and I'm looking at the track list. I was surprised it's 8 tracks. So that's got the Arc Night and Remember the Name. Those are like their 2 PV tracks or whatever. So I may have to check that out. So
Island?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have mixed feelings. So like I really liked the song that they released the music video for, like right when the album came out. But then I listened to the album, and at times it just felt like the songs had very, very similar structures. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think James and I are kind of in the same general position where I think the last couple bands that, we'd been exposed to that were using violin kind of gave us pretty high standards. You had Ace, their Anonymous Confederate Ensemble, which we fucking loved.
That was...
And then
they went super popular.
Yeah.
Super fast.
That was really frustrating for us when they disbanded. We were like, oh God, come on.
Yeah.
And then even like Rose Noir like has some really cool things that they do with violin and stuff, because they have it's brother sister duo, and sister's the violinist.
Yeah. I think Iolin is really trying to still work through some of the issues that they have with using the violin, because there's not too many bands that use it, like you said. But,
yeah, I mean, I liked what they had going for them. I mean, for a first album, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's also interesting because it's the vocalist is the violinist, correct?
And he plays guitar.
Yeah,
If you
so
watch the music video, he's like switching all three roles. It's kind of amusing.
Yeah, I don't know how he would do that live.
I think at some point he's just going to have to, accept the fact that two of these three things live I'm going to have to pump in with the background music,
Yeah.
So, but it'll be interesting. Like, always open for stuff like this, like that incorporates like other instruments. So, all right. I've been re-listening to the US version of One OK Rock's Ambitions album.
Oh, you have?
Yes. So, I'm a pretty big fan of it. I know a lot of people. I'm sure there's controversy about the shift in the literal shift in genre, basically from like alternative rock to pop rock. But actually, that's kind of one thing I appreciate about J-Rock as a whole is that I can have like artists I listen to, and they'll change their sound, but like they'll just jump from one playlist that I listen to another playlist that I listen to. So like, or like one style that I like to another style that I like. And I think that's kind of interesting. Like, so like, there's plenty of like alternative J-Rock out there. And then, so I was, I listened to a lot of One OK Rock back in the day, and then, now they switched into, pop rock. And so I'm listening to them with like Panic at the Disco and stuff like that if I'm in that mood. I will say that it's, and this is going to be like an unpopular thing to hear for a lot of people.
Oh no.
But like from the US side, in terms of how they're going to be received, I hate to break it to people that don't like American Girls, but that is going to probably be considered their best song, like off the album.
You think so?
I think so, yeah. Because it's very, Western pop rock friendly. And in my opinion, and this is speaking as someone who does listen to a lot of top 40 music, it does it way better than like a lot of their contemporaries. Like it's very well mixed. It's catchy. There's like lyrics that are actually somewhat clever, like it's not poetry, but it's, I guess the best example is like, if you listen to like, Take What You Want, which is the, song that features 5 Seconds of Summer. And you just hear, you compare, Taka's verse to the 5 Seconds of Summer vocalist verse, like the complexity in lyrics difference is like night and day. Like you have Taka and he's singing in it in a second language, and it's actually like fairly, like it's not the same thing over and over and over again. It's there, and there's a little bit of, depth to it, so to speak, for a pop rock song. But then you switch over to 5 Seconds of Summer, which is what the American audience is used to hearing, and is just a very popular band worldwide. And it is the same thing over and over for a lot of it. Like Take What You Want, and Go. They use it like 3 or 4 times. Very bland. It's a very big difference. So I think that as uncomfortable as I'm sure some of their fans are going to be with having a sound like American Girls being associated with One OK Rock, it's going to do a lot for them because it's still a much better take compared to like a lot of other pop rock that I've seen, in the States at least. So. But outside of that, there's a lot of fun songs on there. It's definitely the first J-Rock album I've been able to play in public that like totally fits in with like any other music you would expect to hear in public or whatever, like over here in the States. So I thought that was interesting. So, have you guys been able to check it out at all?
I did before their US tour. I checked it out, and honestly, the way how I feel about how they've gotten popular and the way that their music is changing now to fit the US market, it's like I like looked at how each song was slotted in the Oricon, like each album was slotted in the Oricon as it came out, and their second top charted album was Jinsei Kakete Bokuwa, and that just suddenly jumped up to number 2, where the rest of their like releases were like 10 or below, and then Jinsei Kakete Bokuwa jumps up to number 2, and I think that's what put them on the map to become as popular as they are, because then when they released 35 XXXV, they were number one. But in my opinion, that album isn't as good as Jinsei Kakite Boku wa, because it's like when you listen to each song on that album, it's like completely different almost. Like you can tell it's the same band, but the overall theme of each song and the way it was written and the arrangement is so different that it still keeps you interested throughout the whole album. And with 35 XXXV, it was like they were starting to shift already to turn into pop rock. And then when they signed to Warner Brothers and they had brought in these other vocalists and were releasing the album overseas, that's when they were really thinking about it. And then Ambitions came out, and now everybody's like really upset with how they changed their sound. But it's like Jeff said, it's gonna help them like become more popular in the US with this pop rock sound. But I don't know how I'm not even sure how that's gonna turn off when it comes to their future releases. Like, is it gonna be as varied as it was for them in the past with their previous sound? Because they had done a lot of things with their previous albums. So I'm curious to see what'll happen.
Yeah, very true. Another thing that, and I know, like, again, like it's going to be hard. It's hard for some fans to get along, to get on board with this album. And it will be interesting to see if like it grows in substance, since like this album was largely experimenting with basically a new genre, for them at least. But, like the first thing I thought when I started seeing negative reactions and that they should go back to their old sound and stuff like that is I was like sarcastically like, oh yeah, this is such a travesty. What's going to happen to alternative rock in the Japanese rock scene? Like,
what's going to happen to loud rock?
Oh no.
Oh no.
There's no more bands. Like there's a massive amount of alt rock, like really popular alt rock in alt rock and pop rock in the Japanese music scene, like Radwimps, Alexandros, like Flumpool, like I can go on, but like, but yeah, it'll be interesting. And in their defense, like they've always said in interviews and stuff that like this is what they wanted to do, right? Like they wanted to, go to the US and make it big in the US and stuff like that. So, yeah, interesting stuff. Okay, let's hop into our first topic, which I'm sure we've all got plenty to say about. Lynch has
I'm awake enough to have an opinion.
Yeah, wake up. Let's pause for 5 seconds for Winona to pinch herself awake. We can all do that, actually. I'm a little sleep deprived myself.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lynch had previously gone on hiatus after their bassist Akinori was arrested for possession of marijuana. He left the band, and then a month later, Lynch has now come back.
We don't know it was marijuana.
We don't?
They just said it was an antisocial thing or something like that. Like, it could have been anything, but it's usually drugs.
Yeah. So now they're back as a 4-member band. They're putting out a CD titled The Sinners EP. It's coming out at the end of May. They're going on a tour titled The Sinner Strikes Back in June and July. So let's get into, what are you guys' thoughts on this whole situation of, just, do you think it was warranted, like the need to, have the bassist leave the band, any thoughts to kick us off here?
Well, it's interesting because stuff like this has happened before. Obviously, like the biggest, most famous example I can think of is when Lark and Ciel was really early in their career. Their drummer got arrested for possession, and they had the ending theme song at the time for Rurouni Kenshin, and then it got yanked, and people thought they were done. And I mean, of course, they've become huge now, but so they kicked him out of the band. But there's been other bands that have had things happen where they haven't kicked the band member out or even really gone on hiatus. I mean, I was talking about 12012 earlier. While the vocalist, I mean, he settled out of court ultimately, but he was arrested for being drunk and, strangling somebody. So.
Oh, damn. I didn't even know about that one. Rock and roll.
Yeah, and
just kidding.
For me, I'm just wondering what's going to happen to Akinori. Like, he's clearly been fired from the band and everything, but it's like he basically went off the charts entirely, which is something that always happens when something like this happens. But sometimes you see those members come back with bands of their own, and you wonder how it's going to work out for them when they have that history. Because in Japan, it's like, what happens in your past is really going to stick with you. I can't remember words at the moment because I'm still trying to wake up, and this is a pretty heavy topic, so it's pretty unfortunate that I can't pick out the words that I want to say. But it's clearly going to be something that sticks with him the whole time he's in Visual K, and I don't know how things will work out for him and whether or not he's going to be able to go major a second time with a different label. Because even with Gact, like when the whole tax returns thing came up, he ended up being like let go from Avex and then ended up being picked up by Nestle, who is, let's face it, is a candy bar company. So it's like, man, you screwed up so bad that you can't even be picked up by a proper music label. Like, oh man, I don't even know. I don't think that it's that bad for Akinori quite yet, but like, damn, let's hope it's not.
I feel like he had a lot of connections with other bands, though. So, I mean,
yeah, they always do when they're that caliber that he was. Right. So, we'll see what happens.
This is going to be one of those things for me that I will never, and it's absolutely a cultural difference, and I acknowledge that, but I'm never going to get over how ridiculous it seems to me for a member of a rock band, J-rock, yes, but a rock band nonetheless, being kicked out of a band for something like marijuana possession. And the context for this is that, over here we have, rock bands where the rock stars are doing like all kinds of stuff, and it's like it's almost part of the culture at that point. Like if any of our listeners out there are familiar with Falling in Reverse, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Their vocalist, Ronnie Radke, is like to this day still doing like super asshole shit, like throwing mic stands into the audience. He was arrested for like domestic assault, and kicked out of his old band for like drug abuse and stuff like that. And while he was in prison, he did a prison stint after that for an altercation where he was related to a fatal shooting. And like, if you I can't think of anything that would be more poisonous to your career than that. But while he was in prison, he was already working on forming a new band. He had hype. He had his members all together, and he came out, and Falling in Reverse is like one of the larger rock bands out there in the States. And so then to compare it to something like this, where it's just like, socially bad charge or whatever. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, man, like, this is rock and roll. You got to be able to, like, it's really hard to comprehend, like, as someone from the West. You guys have any thoughts on that? You disagree or anything like that?
Well, it's how we were talking about like how media is dealt with in Japan and stuff. Like, you're like, yeah, it's rock and roll, people need more freedom and stuff, but in Japan it's kind of like more like it's controlled, like how baby metal shot to success, even though it's like not quite like heartfelt, spirited rock and roll. They're an idol group, and all their music is being written by somebody else, and it's like almost like a formulaic kind of thing where it was written so that people like it and people follow them because they don't know exactly why, but they think it's cute and they think it's fun to listen to. But at the end of the day, they're still an idol group, and it's not quite rock and roll because, oh damn, I'm kind of hurting right now, but rock and roll is like something that's more emotional and something that is more heartfelt by the band itself instead. And when you have like a band, when you have a band that wants more freedom in Japan, it's kind of a more difficult thing to grasp,
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
I guess so. It's still never something I'm going to be able to wrap my head around. But I mean, hopefully as more of these bands and the Japanese industry gets more of a Western exposure, maybe they'll be able to, ease up a little bit on, some of the artists and stuff. Cause I mean, like the fact of the matter is that like, this isn't a K-pop idol group or something like that. This shouldn't be like a huge scandal as far as I'm concerned. Like if this happened if Lynch was a very global band and this happened, like, do you guys think like the reaction still would have been the same?
I don't think it would have been the same in the US, but I think in Japan it would have been the same, but like in the US people would have been like, marijuana? Really? That's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Or something along those lines, so.
All right. So our next topic, and this is our main topic for today, is we have some really sad news, guys, that Visual K is dead. And
can you like dub in Death Gaze's Ring the Death Knell or something?
No, not dub in Visual K's Undead.
Just a couple of Jin from the Black Squans like, oh no!
Yeah.
No, we're kidding. It's not dead. It's like super not dead, but it's been like a topic of discussion going around the internets that,
it's funny because it's been a topic for the past like 10 years since the J-Rock Revolution celebration.
Right. It really reheated in 2016. We can talk about why people are saying it's dead. Obviously, there was like a shitload of disbandments. I don't even know where to start, right? Like Screw, Born.
Garugamesh. Oh, my heart.
All kinds of small ones. I think Ozdead went on hiatus in 2016.
Fun fact though, just because bands disband doesn't mean that the genre is dead. There are hella small bands that have disbanded that we did not pay any attention to because we didn't have the resources possible to be able to follow these bands before. So it's like, just because we're paying attention to these bands disbanding doesn't mean that Visual K is dying.
Well, yeah, like I encourage people, like, if you go, there's the one Visual K database website. It's in Japanese, but it's pretty accessible.
Yeah.
You go to vkdb.jp, like, you can punch in a band and, you click on your favorite member and it'll show you the bands they've been in. If you look at, like, the members of, like, Derlinger or, like, even, like, L'Arc-en-Ciel and, like, you trace their drummer, Yukihiro, he's been in, like, 50 bands,
Wow.
It's
or like the Gazette. Like, haven't they been in like hella bands? So when they got to the Gazette, they were like, "Yo, guys, this is our last band.
All the successful bands.
We can't make it anywhere."
All the successful bands have been in hella bands. Like all the band members have been in hella bands. Like,
well, and then there's like some members that are in like 3 bands right now.
Yeah,
yeah, like Charge in Omega Drip. He's in he works with Marty Friedman. And that guy is from America, and he tours with Marty Friedman in Europe and the US, and he's also in Ziz with Cozy, and he's everywhere. It's one of those things.
So there's a few main points, that I think we're all in agreement on, which is one, obviously it's not dead, but why? So, the first one, like we said, is that just because a bunch of bands disband in a scene does not mean the scene is dying. You have to
means it's growing.
You have to look at activity overall, not just activity of bands you like or bands that you're familiar with. And then I think a second point that I don't think a lot of people are giving enough credit for is that, and it's got a lot of reasons behind it. It's the age, we live in an age of technology or like Winona said, resources are readily available, but the turnaround time on band members from leaving one band and starting another band has increased drastically over the last few years. So it's
easier for them to do this now.
You had Sadie go on hiatus in like fall 2015, I think, and then you had My Bacteria, Heat Island, and Born disbanded in 2016, and then fall 2016 members from all 3 of those are in formed Razor and just came out swinging, and then at the same time you have the ex vocalist from is it Sadie or Sadie? Sadie, sorry. I caught myself there. You know why I get it mixed up is because on Spotify, some of Sadie's tracks are on Spotify, but they're mixed in with a solo female, like, folk or hipster acoustic artist called Sadie.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
Yeah. So, but, you know,
it's like Nightmare on iHeartRadio. You get the wrong Nightmare.
Yeah.
Like, this is a nightmare.
But yeah, and so you've got all these, these bands are popping up faster and faster and faster.
Yeah, so I'd say if anything, there are more bands like forming than there are disbanding. The problem is that we don't see them. Like, they're forming. They are there. It's all those little bands that are supporting other bands during like their during the, I don't want to say one mans or tours, but during those group lives, when they have a bunch of bands slotted for time slots, and we're only paying attention to like 5 of the 15 that are there.
Well, I mean, I guess what I jump in quick is to some of like our listeners and like readers might not be familiar with like the logistics of the Japanese music scene, but it costs a lot of money there to actually put on a live show because of various reasons. And so it really behooves everybody that there's like 5 bands on a list every night if the place opens up. And touring is just like ridiculously expensive in Japan. So a lot of bands can't tour. So I mean, almost everybody's crammed in Tokyo. That's Visual K. And I mean, there's bands elsewhere. But I guess I'd say that some of these small bands that are disbanding, they never get exposure because they never tour because they don't have the money. And then I guess, too, the other thing I'd add is I think a lot of this Visual K's dead stuff is a matter of perspective. I mean, like 6 years ago, like Sug, when they were like at their most bubble poppy, was like really popular and everybody was copying them. And now we're more at like a dark turn, like, Desert, Medjugorje, Black Swan. But, Visual K goes through phases like anything. And I think, right now, if you don't like dark bands and you like the bubble poppy stuff, it seems like Visual K is dead.
Yeah,
so
that's very true. But, even in that case, like you said, it is a matter of perspective and which bands you're exposed to. Because even like the bubble poppy, like Osharake stuff, you've got Purple Stone that's doing their lovely, fun, like
oh my God,
electro rock dance,
thing.
Stuff with like the backup dancers and the PVs and stuff like that. And you've got Rave, who is a indie band that PSC picked up and put and gave them I believe a major debut, and they've been making all kinds of different types of music, but it's all been very it's been you can tell they want them to be the next Sug, for like PSC's new Sug, but it's all got like this little kind of ravey, zany flair to it. So even that, like on its low point, there's still, it's not gone, so to speak.
Also, like, for those who do like Osharake, let's be real. It's only a matter of time before the Gazette decides, hey, man, let's do it. Let's make an Oshare album. Kaze rock style, Only a matter of time.
I mean, they did, Project Dark Age, which in a lot of ways was based off of, like, 13 Stairs minus 1, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So 12 Stairs.
No. I was going to say their next era will be based off of Best Friends.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. To emphasize their friendship.
It's going to be very happy. Yeah. It's going to be great.
Oh my God. No, and another reason that people seem to think that Visual K is dead is that you have a lot of Visual K artists denying that they're Visual K, right? Like,
but that's been a thing since forever.
No, but like people have been saying that Visual K is dead since like 2008 when Duran Gray was like, nah, guys, we aren't Visual K anymore. Because they went to Europe and were like, guys, the best way for us to become a global band is to drop all this makeup. But then, like, they were away from the makeup for the past, like, however many years. And this past, like, when they started the Ghoul tour, they suddenly just went back to makeup. And everyone's like, what the hell? And even NHK World just kept calling them Visual K. So they were just like, yo, we're Visual K again. And when we had asked Kaudu about it, he was like, we got bored. we wanted the makeup.
Yeah, they've been doing makeup since like before Arcade came out, actually, because like their Chain Repulsion PV.
Yeah, for unraveling and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, well, unraveling was still like there was no makeup really involved. If you look at the PV for that,
Well,
like
yeah, but their tour for it was like all makeup.
oh,
That's the
okay,
thing.
okay. Well, then
Yeah.
that must have been when it started because then Chain Repulsion came out, I guess, a year after that, and that was on the that ended up being
tour
on.
was the tour for Unraveling.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
But yeah, like by the time I got around to reviewing Arche, like the end of 2014, like, they were, Kyo had short hair, but he had makeup all over himself, for like the Uroko PV and stuff like that. And even, so talking about During Grade for a second with their visuals, like, even when they weren't in makeup, so to speak, the visual aesthetic of their style never went away. Like it didn't, it's still reflected like in their PVs and in their album art and like all that stuff. So,
oh yeah, definitely.
But yeah, so I mean, it's nice it's nice that we know that they're back in it, so to speak. We know we're waiting for Miyavi never said he's not Visual K, but he never said he's,
still Visual K. He never turned it down and he never re-embraced it, but he's dyed his hair gray and silver and he's gotten that very interesting fashion going about him at this point, and it's almost like he's becoming K-pop, but that's not gonna happen.
Fingers crossed for Neo Visualism Volume 2, the dance version.
Yes.
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 That's all I'm saying.
If he says Neo-Visualism, then boom, he's Visual K still, and we're all happy.
Yeah. So, but like, there's all kinds of like, small, really small bands that are, that are popping up that are making great music that I don't think a lot of people know about. But what I wanted to make a point about is that these small bands, they're like hitting home runs, a lot of them straight out the gate, like first single and stuff like that, Rides in Rebellion is one that I want to plug for sure. Like, much beloved band by those of us that have been fortunate enough to meet them or to find them online. Great symphonic rock theme, but using lots of electronic music in unique ways. But right from the gate, they were making like great stuff. Dada Roma, who's like a couple years old now, like came out swinging hard. Oh yeah. But even smaller bands like Astaria or Anfiel, if that's how you say their name, they all came out making like really good quality music, like compared to like when the Gazette first started, as an indie band, so to speak, or when During Grace was an indie band,
Sure.
If you go back and you compare that to like the quality of music that's coming out from like indie bands, like now, like it's not even close, So like, so you've got like, you've got bands that are disbanding very quickly or that tend to, you've got a scene where, I guess, disbandments are happening more often, but it's all or happen more often than in other scenes, but it's kind of always been this way. But then the upside is that, you have all these newer bands, that are able to get like a good quality sound going fast. And even if they disband, their turnover time is getting frequently reduced. So we're in a really good position in terms of like music and stuff. It's just an issue of, and I don't know exactly what the view on this is in the actual, Japanese Visual K scene, like over in Japan. But I mean, for international listeners, it's just a matter of finding some of those bands,
Yeah, it really is. And it's also like we said before, there are those bands who are just more concerned with making it domestically and then they are making it overseas because they just don't know that they have the audience overseas, because they don't you'd follow them on Twitter and you send them a few tweets and they might see your tweets every now and then, but they think, oh great, okay, so we have like 3 people overseas who follow us, but nobody in Japan is following us. So ultimately those bands will have to disband for whatever reasons, like they can't find a label to sign with to really help them out, or they just don't have the right following that they wanted, or they just don't like their musical direction, so they just want to try again, So it's when a band disbands, you really can't think, oh man, Visual K is dead. You got to think, okay, what's the next step for the members of these bands,
Yeah. Right. And like in the case of Razor, you know, for a lot of bands it works out really well, or a lot of band members it works out really well because you know, one of the critiques I've always had of like Born is that, you know, their vocalist Ryoga, you know, he's a great vocalist and a great performer, you know, but there's always been like, you know, these cringy ways in which he's like almost like scream saying or like tried to do more like traditional screaming and stuff like that. And like it was lovably cheesy on Born, you know, so to speak, right? But like, you know, it was always like a little off. But when he does that in Razor with like their like metalcore-esque like sound and stuff like that, he's able to get away with a lot more and not sound cheesy, you know, because there's like he's got so much backing him up that he can like scream sing a little bit or like go a little bit wilder with his music, and he's got, or with his vocals, and he's got like these crazy instrumentals backing him up, so it sounds like so much more organic, you know. So like,
I liked the cheese though. I liked
the cheese.
The cheese will Born will always have a forever the most specialist of places in James and I's hearts, guys.
it just sounded. I don't know. You and I have talked about that. I don't know how to categorize it. It's special.
I've always said, and I think we would all agree on this, is that Born is like the only band that I would consider, that I would call trashy and mean it as like the highest form of compliment.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
Because they were just able to take like, I don't know, like I've seen other bands do the same takes on stuff, these like really blunt approaches to you know, like different, you know, themes and stuff, and using like, you know, especially in their earlier days, like a very like almost like a garage band-esque like sound to them. And I've seen other bands do it and it's just so cringy, but like, you know, the results would be so cringy, but you know, with Born, they were always able to pull it off, and it was like, it's just very lovable to just watch them, because, you know, they would come out with some great music. They would come out with some flops, you know, but it was almost like in a lot of ways they didn't really give a shit too much, you know, like that they were just kind of doing their own thing. And so that one hit really hard when they disbanded. So we definitely feel you guys out there. Like when Guru Gamesh disbanded, like that was pretty
that
tragic.
hurts my soul when Guru Gamesh disbanded.
Yeah, that was rough.
Oh man.
Especially because their last song that they put out was fucking gorgeous. Like,
the best kind of closure you could get from a band disbanding.
It broke me. Like, oh man.
Like, period. Like they were trying to end the sentence. God.
But I think for all of us, like this has been happening in VK for so long, and we've experienced this so many times that, like, even though last year was rough, I think it was more of us like sympathizing with other people, because you know, we've gone through stuff like when Ace disbanded, like that sucked, you know, or like when And Eccentric Agent disbanded back in the day, like
that destroyed me.
Yeah,
I remember when Versailles first went on hiatus, people went fucking crazy because they were like, what does this mean? Because at first it wasn't like, they didn't like, it was like their website was hacked, and then the letter went up a day too soon or something like that because it was Kamijo's birthday, and then people were like, oh my god, are they actually gonna go on hiatus? Is this the end of Visual K? And people were like crying, and then people were some people like myself were trying to like actually confirm the information, and then eventually like their management had put out a letter saying, yes, they're actually gonna go on hiatus, but we didn't want this information to be up until later, you know. And when it was confirmed, people were just like, it's over. Visual K is dead. Like it was insane. But now they came back, and people were just like, oh, this is great.
Yeah, and then in the meantime, you've got like heavyweights, like true heavyweights, like Muck or the Gazette or Duran Gray, that are just
and the
going
Japan
strong.
Freaking came back too, so it's just like it's not dead.
That's what's a very unique, and that's like a very unique thing to like Visual K, maybe J-Rock in general, but especially Visual K is like this is like a scene where like the current bands, like their major influences and heroes are also like becoming as active in the scene as like, they're, bands like 3 generations down that like they've inspired and stuff like that. And I know that kind of happens over here. Like the Rolling Stones just came out with a new album and stuff, but like, there's just such a strong
Nikki
sense
Sixx
of,
is still around.
yeah, like you don't see like, members of the Rolling Stones like shouting out like Royal Blood or something like that. But you'll see like, Yoshiki of X
shouts
Japan.
out Durangray.
Yeah, she shouts out Durangray like, thanks for continuing the scene, guys. It's like, I'm like, man, if there was ever a way to guilt trip them into getting back into Visual K, that was it.
Or like Yoshiki tried to strong arm Hyde at like the Visual World Summit into Visual K.
Oh, he did?
He totally did. I asked Haley about it, and she said, yeah, like when they were on stage doing a duet or whatever, like they were doing a crossover performance with Hyde and X Japan. I think it was like Vamps and X Japan or something like that. Like Yoshiki was like, went up to Hyde and was like, yeah, so we should work together more. You should be Visual K or something like that. And Hyde was like,
You just have to change the angles on your makeup a little bit,
Like, mind you, we already asked Vamps if they were Visual K, and they were like, well, we're not influenced by Visual K, so no.
Yeah, and Larkin CL is the same way,
No, yeah, because they're all influenced by like hair metal, which is an influence of Visual K.
Yeah, so they attribute their influences more directly to hair metal, which I can see, especially in Vamps and stuff. The Hyde is a huge fan of Nikki Sixx, huge fan. So you can definitely tell. I would consider Hyde like an ally of Visual K, so to speak.
An ally of Visual K.
No, I think it's a bit like
we need to make this an ally thing, like allies.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my god.
But I've always been so irritated that he's like so adamant that he's not Visual K when he clearly is.
In a way, but it's like, no, he's saying he's more Western than Visual K. He's saying he's like straight up hair metal, like, like Poison and The Cure and shit like that,
I can see that with Vance, but Larkin CL, and I'm actually not super like into their music and stuff like that, but from the looks I've seen, like, I don't know, man. Like Hyde's looks and Larkin CL are like very Visual K to me. But
have you ever listened to any of the drummer's stuff? He has his own solo project called Acid Android, and it's like total Visual K.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true. And speaking of like artists that have been around almost as long as Hyde, for example, like Acid Black Cherry is a great example of one great artist rising from the ashes of another artist of his previous band's disbandment, so to speak. Because what was his previous band's name? I totally can't remember off the top of my head.
Oh God, nobody can. We all know Acid Black Cherry.
Yeah, well, I think it was John d'Arc was like the previous band.
Yeah.
But the fact that John d'Arc, from everything I've researched and everything I've listened to, was a very good band, and they're very popular. But the fact that like Acid Black Cherry has just gotten so huge and made some great music. Like I'm a big ABC fan, but. That to me is like the classic example of like, oh no, I can't believe they disbanded. Like this is the worst thing ever. But then it's like the best thing ever came out from it in a lot of ways,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in that spirit of, that there's, that Visual K is not dead and that, it's all about finding, some of the newer bands that maybe don't have exposure in your area. I wanted to go through, James every year writes a lovely, usually 3-part series called James Picks the 30 Best Albums of 2016. And he picked out some great ones, and I wanted to go through some of that. James, do you want to give a little bit of background about how you pick your albums and stuff like that?
I usually just sit down and I look over what all came out, and I mean, by that point, I've already kind of got a decent idea, like what flopped, what was decent. And I usually just sort of drop a list of stuff that I think was decent enough to be considered, and I pester other writers for VKH, and I actually just sort of re-listened to everything. I just sort of some of it I'll put on in the background while I'm cooking or something, and something where I'm still listening to it pretty well. And so, yeah, it just kind of, I re-listened to everything, I guess, and sort of make a final evaluation, and then I just place them.
Okay, cool. So they are ranked then. Would you consider them ranked or?
Yeah, I mean, I'd consider them ranked, but in a kind of weird way, because for one, I never include albums that are like the Gazette or something, or Duran Gray, because like everybody knows that was a good album, obviously.
Yeah.
And so I usually try to put the spotlight on, more indie bands or, more mid-tier bands too. I mean, I've put Lynch on, Screw. And so, yeah, I mean, I try to sort of spotlight the indie bands, and I give them a bit of leeway in terms of ranking. Obviously they're not going to.
They don't have the same resources,
right? So. And so, if some of the sound quality is a little bit wonky or whatever, I try to take that into consideration in terms of like innovation, because so much of what keeps Visual K around is people trying new things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And this has been like a really good article, especially this last year. These articles have been really great, especially for me, like for finding new bands that just were completely off my radar. And so James, did you have any that like really stand out to you in the context of like all these people thinking Visual K is dead to some degree,
I guess I was really impressed by Desert. I mean, they put 2 albums out this past year. And I guess that surprised me a bit. I can't remember the last time that somebody pulled that off, even with an album and a mini album. I guess maybe a few years back, Realize, who was part of sort of the Digital K thing that you talk about. They kind of pulled it off, but obviously there were some kind of the usuals, No God, lm.c, Curyu, they were on again. But Desert, I was pretty surprised by how good that was. And then the Plastic Trees vocalist, Ryutaro, he put out an EP. And I guess I was really expecting that it'd be kind of the same old, but it was like in a lot of really interesting and subtle ways different from what I've come to expect. So I enjoyed that. And then another one that I don't know how much it surprised me. I was glad to finally see they put an LP out, but Lilith from, I believe Hong Kong. I could be mistaken. They might be from mainland China, but, they put out their first full LP. Well, actually, they're going to break up now, so that'll be the only one. But I really enjoyed
Don't do this, James. I'm trying to. Visual K's dead.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
I'm kidding.
Well, they're gonna move on to other things.
Right.
So
what we should say is we look forward to the next projects that they will soon be involved in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they have
But
reached the musical limits of this project.
The other thing that was on the list this year that has been sort of not really on much before was just sort of like lighter sounding Visual K was in a bigger way. New, who I'm not sure.
Oh, I know who that is.
Yeah.
The V New. Like I know who you're talking about. I know.
Not V New.
Not V New. Just
like
New.
New, yeah.
No,
and
he would not be putting a V-New album
Ooh.
on this. I know, James.
Yeah. No Vino's on the list.
V New is not very good.
Yeah. No, not Vinu, but New.
New. Okay, I know.
Yeah,
New.
but like not spelled like the new year, maybe visualizing. So, them and then Hologram both put out albums that were, I guess News had a bit more variation in it and had some more like really distorted guitars. But like Hologram was like, that's like a really like chill album. Like I talk about like it making me want to slow dance in it. But like, I think it was interesting that people are really beginning to do that and pull it off really well, because a lot of that was, and more came out with the first.
I was gonna bring up more too, because I started listening to them directly off of a suggestion from your album and from Winona.
Yeah, I've been listening to more myself because, like, I had to. Okay, I was the one who had to write their introductory article, and after sitting down and having to translate their whole backstory for the band, like, it basically made me like hooked on their whole concept because they base their concept off of like Greek mythology and things like that, you know.
Yeah.
So, and having to translate Greek words from Japanese really bad. I was like, what the fuck is that word? And then I would look it up and I'd be like, oh my god.
Oh,
man,
that's wild.
But
yeah, that's a really new sound to me. I've never heard a sound like that.
No, if you listen to Sugar, Loki's other band, like they sound, you can tell, like he put Sugar in there. Like he put what he learned from Sugar in there, and also what he learned from Gonsfield, his solo project. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good point, James, because I remember like a few years back, when Nine Goats Blackout disbanded, like people were like, I don't know where I'm going to find this kind of music again, but like,
well, to be interesting, there's always been, or to be like honest, there's always been that subcurrent of that sort of more almost edging towards sort of gothic sound within Visual K, but it's always kind of flown under the radar. And especially after Nine Goats disbanded, I mean, like Ambergris was like really big up there for a bit, but then they broke up. But I mean, there was Emere, Silence broke up now, but Emere, Mooney, and then I'm blanking, Dies, sort of taking up that contingent, and they often get really overlooked. But I mean, they're like really hardcore indie. But that sort of contingent, and they play a lot of gigs together, has always kind of carried that flag, I guess. But it's interesting too how that really sort of soft sound has also historically been tied in with the more shoegaze sort of bands, like the really heavy distortion, like Umbrella, Dish. And I don't know, I guess it's just kind of interesting how those bands have really gravitated towards each other in terms of playing together and sharing members.
Yeah. And this is a great example for, of finding new music because, if you go back to like, you're wondering about the state of Visual K and stuff like that, a lot of the bands that disbanded were, they were, a lot of them were popular, but more so than that, they were all on the very energetic side last year, lots of, Screw, Guru Gamesh, stuff like that. But like, there's a lot of like, and I usually am into that stuff, or I like wild, crazy, energetic stuff,
yeah, for sure.
But, for me, personally, speaking as one of the fans of that, it's been a very interesting experience as I've been able to dive into some of the slower, more unique stuff, because there is stuff out there that is unique enough to hold my attention in spite of my really slow, in spite of my really short attention span and my desperate need for adrenaline pumping things,
Sure.
But, so it's been, it's fun because you really can go from listening to stuff like the Dogma era Gazette stuff, to, listening to like more or, all kinds of bands like that. So,
yeah.
I wanted to bring up a couple of bands that I had, or a couple albums that I checked out, from this, that I thought were interesting. Totally agree with you on Desert. Last year was the first year I really got into Desert, and I'm like a huge fan. Man. Like,
yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Just great stuff. Love the English translations of some of their song names. Like what was the big one that they had that was like, first of all, they have a PV song called Hentai,
yeah,
great.
Yeah.
And in it, he is lightly, creepily singing like hentai.
Yeah.
And then he switches to like, as the vocalist in Desert is wont to do, he switches from these light murmury kind of, or this light, almost whimpering kind of like, clean singing to this savagely deep and heavy, like, hentai.
Yeah. Well, he's such a small guy too. It's interesting to watch their live footage.
Yeah.
Like he'll dive into the crowd. You're worried, like, oh my gosh, he's going to get crushed. Like he's a tiny guy.
So his rough vocals sound like a completely different person is speaking out of his mouth. Like,
Yeah.
like, it's so crazy, but it's so much fun. I did want to point out that there was one track on their album. Let me pull it up real quick. Not the comp.
Well, as you pull it up,
Yeah,
I would
go
like
ahead.
to point out that hentai has a cat in it throughout the
Yeah.
Yes,
movie. It's
yes,
the
the-
greatest thing ever.
The primary focus of the PV really is the cat, and it's low-key genius.
It kind of reminded me of there's a shoegaze band from Japan called Tokyo Shoegazer. Well, I mean, they've broken up now, and a lot of the members resurfaced in a new band called CQ. But their whole thing was always this cat was in all of their photos, and it was on the cover art for their album. And now that they've reformed in CQ, there's a ton of things with the cat in it. Like all of their Twitter merch photos are like this cat just like lounging.
Because cats, cats are the greatest.
Yeah.
No, that's a really fun PV to watch because it's a really epic track, and like, it's even got like it does good shifting from like really savage breakdowns to like, lighter but still energetic, chorus and stuff like that. But then throughout the entire thing, like it's these the primary focus is the cat just kind of chilling
It is,
for
as
sure.
the band is
Everything else,
like
just the cat.
so intensely performing, and the cat's like whatever.
The cat's like, what the fuck are you doing?
No, but I did want to, and James, I haven't had a chance to discuss this with you, but like, so I think it's track 4 off of Psycho no Shoku Taku. Did I say that?
Yeah. Sure.
James, you should repronounce that.
Yeah, repronounce
For
it.
the sake of things.
Let me look up the title. Psycho no Shotaku, that one?
Yeah. Something.
Okay.
Yeah, close enough. I think we got it between the two of us.
Yeah, sure.
So it's like track 4 is called Mondai Saku. It's the trippiest, most minimalist song I've heard in like a really long time. It's like the one that's got like, it's just like the only percussion throughout most of it is just like, it's just a slight like ting, ting, ting on like the cymbal. And then this.
Oh, yeah. I just
about?
pulled it up. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, and then it's just like this really like, I don't know what you call that kind of distortion on a bass, but it's just like, what it sounds to me like is like if I got really high and listened to Chillin' Money Blues by Miyavi.
Oh my god.
So if you can imagine that, like it's like this super chill but really loopy song that's like it's very minimalist, especially for desert, but like I really enjoyed it. So another one that I think we could probably discuss that would be lm.c's album. Veda. I don't know. It was definitely very interesting because it's very Buddhist themed, and I never expected that from LMC.
Not from them, no.
Yeah.
That's what's weird. Well, it's been interesting because now, I mean, 3 members of the what the guitarist is the guitarist Maya, or is that the vocalist?
The guitarist is Aiji. Maya is the vocalist.
Yeah, Aiji. Okay, thank you. So Aiji was in Perot before that, which was like totally different style, like aesthetically. And even down to the guitars he was playing in Perot, like he was playing like a Fender Jazz Master, like things that were like not like looking like that. But,
and he was also traveling a lot. Like he has his travel book, I think it is.
Yeah.
So I think that from that is where he got a lot of his inspiration for that.
Right.
Because he travels so much.
Yeah. So it's interesting to sort of that this album would come out in the year that I guess Perot did 2 big lives at Saitama Super Arena 2 years back, I think. I might have my dates mixed up. I guess it was 2014, so 3 years ago. But so now, and Perot's doing a thing with Dur and Gray now. They're like doing a joint live.
Oh, wow.
And so Perot is kind of like weirdly coming back, and 3 members of Perot are in Angelo. So it's interesting to me that they do this more Buddhist themed one as Perot begins to come back, because the vocalist of Perot and now the vocalist of Angelo Kirito is very like, I don't know, sort of invested in like traditional Japanese stuff. Like he's given interviews and talked about, you know, his patriotism and stuff. And so I don't know. It's sort of weird that this LMC album would coincide with that. The sort of Perot coming back.
Right. Yeah. I think LMC is a good example of a band that's been very active, but has not been on a lot of people's radars.
Yeah, definitely not outside of Japan.
Actually, as James, as you were talking about Perot, I know exactly what you're talking about with the joint live with Duran Gray for Androgynous. Like that I think it's 2 days, 2 different days for the concerts.
Right.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about with that. It's been kind of promoted like under low key.
Yeah.
Primarily it's a Japanese thing, but it's like nobody knows it's really happening, you know? So to bring it up is a good thing.
Yeah, definitely very, very interesting album though. Veda. LMC's kind of always had this very lovable, like, I don't want to say cheesiness, but like, you know, very
Oshare, very Oshare.
Very
Very Oshare.
So like to see them like mixing this this, you know, all these Buddhist influences, like the Buddha, like the opening track was like, that really caught me off guard. But you know, I kind of like it at the same time. It's very fun to.
It's like really concept-y album-y, but it's not a concept.
Yeah, but then you have stuff like Monroe Walk that's on there. That's like, I think was a previous single, and that's very like, you know, kind of more in the Osharike wheelhouse, I think, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed that they took like some risks because they're a band that I'm not really used to seeing that from.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Another band on here I wanted to point out was Deviloof. So, for all my deathcore fans out there, boy, do I have a band for you. So this is like the first, so we have like, there's like Nocturnal Bloodlust that is like a combination of like melodic deathcore, some deathcore, and like metalcore and stuff like that. But if you know anything about the deathcore scene, you know, there are a lot of people that really appreciate, you know, a very purist deathcore sound. And that's what Deviloof is. You know, they're not inspired by Duran Gray. Yeah. They're not inspired by, you know, whoever, you know, insert heavy, you know, VK band here. They are a deathcore band. And I have that confirmed from their, you know, promoter and everything. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, they identify as deathcore. And
they are deathcore.
They are deathcore. I have that confirmed. That's breaking news on the show, by the way.
VKH has it first.
Deviloof is literally deathcore. But it's really interesting. I don't know, in a scene where, you know, it's so normal, yet again such a rare thing, but still so normal that to have a scene where, you know, every band is mixing stuff, you know, and trying new things. It's nice every now and then to just see, you know, a band just be like, no, this is like beyond Visual K, beyond like J-Rock, beyond anything. We're just like, we're just going to do this. We're going to do the shit out of this genre, you know? Like,
right. It's like watching them like Ruin. Like when you watch that, like when it first came out, it had the sort of cleanness to like the camera angles and their body movements that reminded me of like Eat You Alive when they were around.
Mm-hmm.
And
you were waiting for the anime chorus and it never came, motherfucker.
yeah. And it was almost like too much, but it was too much in the right way. And like, I thought like I'd listen to the mini album and I'd like be like, nah, this is just over the top. And it was over the top, but it worked.
Yeah.
Like,
it's the power of good deathcore, man.
Right.
And I want to give a special shout out for one of their songs that they have up on YouTube that might have the most savage title I've ever seen in VK. It is all.
Is it just the?
It is all one word, and it is. I'm gonna go for it. It's.
Oh no!
It's
here we go.
Syphilis, chancroid, chlamydia, clervicitis, protozoa, AIDS.
It's just like a bunch of stuff just thrown together.
All the STDs in the world,
except for protozoa, which is like just a bacteria. And by the way, those of you who think I mispronounced cervicitis, I did not. That is how it is spelled in the name, is clervicitis. So, but like fucking good song, and just like I love like crazy shit like this, man. Like this is what I came for.
This is what Visual
This is
K
what
is
you
about
came-
to Jeff.
This is what Jeff signed up for.
This is what I signed
When
up
he came to VKH Press, this is exactly what he fucking wanted.
So, oh man, but yeah. We could also talk about some of the releases that have come out since you put up this article, James. Like and Cafe had their first album come out in like.
Oh yeah.
Like how
I remember
long?
when they first announced that they were going to come back, and everybody was going crazy because they had announced their comeback on April 1st. Right? International April Fool's Day. Everybody was like, "Is this real?"
What a troll move, man.
And then everybody was scared to post it, and then VKH was the first ones to publish it because I was like going crazy trying to confirm everything. And then one of the promoters I know was like, "Yeah, so the thing about April 1st in Japan is that that's like the start of a new season. So it's not so much April Fools as it is like they want to start spring off right." And I'm just
but
like,
Japan
okay.
is huge into April Fool.
I know, but the thing is that it was real, so it's okay.
It's so funny. But it's like their first album in like what, 4 or 5 years? Something
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah.
Something crazy like that. Maybe more. Shit. It's been a while.
I'm really addicted to, and I know it, I don't think it was it came out in 2015, but it's on the album. I've been listening to this album, Laugh Song. But the first track is Senin Dive, and that song has just been way stuck in my head, like. So speaking of, Asharake just definitely not being dead, but
Yeah.
like that's a good, it's been a pretty fun album to get into. So,
Yes, with all the glitz and glamour of, all this gothic metal happening, we still got Osharake.
yeah,
Just
and
being as
with
colorful as ever.
and with Sug trying, like more of a, I don't know, like a Harajuku K, but like still,
Yeah, no, Harajuku K I think is spot on.
yeah. So, but yeah. What do you guys think of? Can you guys like help me quantify? Like, I haven't really been following Ann Cafe's progress since they came back, but are they still big? Are they still doing stuff?
They're in Japan, they're definitely still big. I think that a lot of people were excited for their comeback, but I think, like you, some people haven't been following it too closely because, like, you have all these other bands to follow, so it makes it harder. But I think they're still big because they're still major. So technically, they're still big.
All right.
That's all I got, though.
Okay. And I think, James, we would be remiss if we did not bring up the wonderfulness that is Orchalade's debut, release. Yeah. Oh God! Do you want to give the background on this one?
I'll let you. I mean,
okay. So the big head turner, I guess, would be it's the ex vocalist from Eat You Alive and one of the ex guitarists from Death Gaze. So right there, you should be paying a lot of attention.
Well, Death Gaze hasn't disbanded; they're just on hiatus.
Okay, the guitarist.
So it's not X.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
the guitarist from Death Gaze. Good point. Good call. Fingers crossed. Come back.
Yes.
Come back to us.
They'll come back.
Yeah, they better.
In like 10 years.
Hopefully
it's not like Malice Misery, where we're still waiting.
Yeah. But like, so, obviously a head turner right there, but like, it is like, it's just like some really, really good Nagoya K straight out the gate.
Yeah.
Like this.
Oh yeah.
They've just put out this one mini album, Espada, and it's so spot on. Like,
yeah.
Like they took like, all the great stuff out of, like their experience in Nagoya K bands, like you can really tell. And this album has like a kick to it, like how, like, I don't know if a lot of people know this unless they follow All's Dead really closely, but All's Dead has a really hard sound that's also kind of somewhat noticeable, like beyond like maybe some of their PV songs or whatever. And I got like a All's Dead meets like, hardcore Nagoya K vibe, you know, out of this. Like,
Yeah.
but like, long story short, like it comes out to like a great song, like great album to listen to. Like, like man, see,
Yeah,
you can hear my reaction. Like, oh god, yeah. So, but yeah, anything to add on that, James, or did I cover all the bases?
Nah, you covered it, man.
Yeah. So yeah, like trust me, man. Like guys, when you like find like this new stuff, like some of the newer stuff, and you find the thing that, you know, scratches the itch you're looking for, so to speak, like, you know, like it is beyond, you know, not dead. The scene.
Yeah, and
Right.
another thing is that like when people say it's dead, it's funny because we're like VKH is doing a lot to really like show people all the new bands that there are that they could follow. Like we have the music tips going up on Twitter pretty often nowadays,
Right.
and then we have James's yearly year in review thing with the 30 bands that people probably aren't paying attention to. So when people say Visual K isn't dead, it's more or less they're not. I mean, when people say Visual K is dead, then it's more or less them not trying to find bands to replace what they want, you know?
And, you know, I got to be honest, like looking back, like, you know, now that we're getting the kind of music that we're getting out of like Razor, you know, that
Right.
never would have happened if Born hadn't disbanded. And it's like such a crazy thing for me to think that it's like, I'm almost okay with the fact that Born disbanded because of how much I like the new stuff, you know?
Almost.
Almost. I'm totally okay. I'm just gonna take this stance right now. I'm totally okay with Screw disbanding, by the way. So
Really?
I think you've been okay with Screw disbanding when they disbanded.
I just really liked their indie stuff, like back in the day, like Vanquish and Gather Roses and Vegas.
Gather
and
Roses
stuff
was a great one.
like
That's like one of their most popular ones.
that was like the entire concept behind their name was that, like, you know, it was like, you know, this life is so full of tough shit or whatever that it's like you just gotta screw it out of life or something like that, you know, like
Yeah.
sounds so deep when I say it, but like but like it was good. It was like, you know, somewhat like, you know, vicious music, and it was good stuff. And then, you know, as they got closer and closer to becoming major, it became more and more watered down. And then like when they put out that first like major single, I was like, this is unacceptable.
What was weird is the first major album still had some really harsh tracks on it.
Had some really what?
Harsh tracks on it.
Harsh as in like heavy or
Just really aggressive, yeah.
Who were
okay.
they signed to? They were signed to PSC, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, that's why.
Right.
And I'm
That's why.
actually a pretty staunch defender, before people like hate me too much, of PSE bands, like, because I have seen cases, we've all seen cases where PSE will drain the life out of a band, you know, but I've also seen plenty of cases where PSE has empowered bands like Rave to like try all these different things before they settle on their final identity. And I think there's some value to that, you know.
I'll never forgive them for ruining Vivid. I love
Oh yeah,
Vivid.
no one will.
And,
I'll never forget.
oh my god. They like ruined Vivid.
They
Like
really did.
Vivid's like first big single was like the bomb, and then
Which one was that? Was that
the one where they're all sparkly and they're
was
like
that the 69
They were
something?
vivid.
yeah.
Yeah. That was one of the first bands I was like, it got to a point where it was like, so it's a Visual K band, but like no makeup, huh? Like,
Yeah.
I think that's Visual K like right now.
even
That's
more
the
than
part where
like
people
Duran
think it's
Gray.
dead.
Like even more than like
Yeah,
Duran
it's a
Gray.
Visual
Like
K.
that one was like,
But Duran Gray straight up like denied they were Visual K. With Vivid, it was like they were like, no, we're Visual K, but they don't have makeup.
I'm like, you look like Host Club boys. Like, what's going on here?
You look like you're a J-pop group.
Yeah,
is
I
what
guess
you
that's
look
what I was
like.
going for.
Wait, but have you seen photos of their bassist now?
No.
He's like, let me
He's
look
all
up.
over the place.
He's like a bodybuilder now.
Oh, I've seen that with a couple of ex-Visual K people.
Well, when Screw was
Yeah.
still around, their vocalist was like an underwear model.
Yeah. So I will say I was down with, you know, some of the singles off of Psycho Monsters, which was like,
Sure.
which was like their kind of, it was at that phase when the Gazette had put out Toxic and Division, and everybody was trying, and so everybody was like, okay, it's okay to do this now. So everybody,
people thought Toxic was bad, and then Division came out, and they were like, okay, now it's okay.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Toxic was like we'll get into that later.
That was a growing pains for them.
That was a singles compilation album, but
yeah.
Say what you want. So many fan favorites are still on that album, man. Like,
that's true.
Say what you want. As an album, yeah, maybe not that awesome, but Division had just come out, and it had been like,
Division was fucking amazing,
and it was like, so everybody was like, Nightmare the year after put out, the one album by them that I actually like, which is Scums.
Oh man, the one album.
Well, like in recent memory, like
they're also on hiatus. So
Nightmare is?
Yeah, they're on hiatus.
When did that happen?
Last year.
Okay, good. I kind of needed
September or something like that. And then
they needed a break though.
No, they did. They were running out of ideas, and I think that's
they were beyond out of ideas.
Gremlins. I think that's why Gremlins is like a thing.
Oh, okay.
So that so that can be explored more.
God, like we're really getting into deep water here in terms of bands that I have like hard feelings about, but like
some pretty strong feelings that Jeff has about bands that had better
sticking with
potential.
Screw for a second, I was like down with like Psycho Monsters, which was like their like mixture of like dance music and stuff to a degree, but like that more than anything was like, oh, Fugly sound reminds me of other songs that I like, so I like this song. And then like after that, things got a little better, like I think their best song that they might have ever made since they went major was Anitya. Like that's I don't know if you guys remember that song. It came out on many albums.
I do.
I really like that one. But like the Screw that I had loved in the beginning has been gone for like a decade. But so it wasn't the hardest of feelings when they disbanded, but like I feel for people that got into them and stuff like that.
You know who irritated me? Yellow Fried Chickens.
Yes.
So Yellow Fried Chickens, they really bother me. Like their vocalist. Their vocalist John, the second vocalist, he's like Gacked Part 2, I think, as James put him as, because he's like he took everything that he learned from Gack and just like re-emulated it. And I was like, dude, just do you. Like, why do you have to try to be like Gack? Like every time in the PVs when they cut from Gack to John, it's literally from Gack to Gack. I'm just like, why?
But like the thing is that John's band, like on its own, was like a pretty interesting alt rock band. Like,
and why didn't he just do that?
Well, I know that's the thing. But, I mean, I'm guessing Gack was probably pretty heavily handed telling him what to do.
Okay, so another good example of like how Visual Kei is not dying is that we're able to talk all this crap about certain bands we don't like. So that's a good sign that it's like, we don't, I feel like there was a while where we had to really be in lockstep behind like a lot of Visual Kei bands. Like we really felt like nervous about critiquing them and stuff like that, because we were really worried for the survival of the scene and stuff. Now, like, it's a lot easier to be like very vocal, maybe not about like newer bands and stuff, but like it's nice that we're the scene's at a point where we don't have to hold, we're holding a band's feet to the fire in terms of making good music is not like risking their career necessarily.
Or, like holding, like artists who are being managed by chocolate companies.
Yeah. Well, it's just like
making video games.
I'm trying to make a serious point here, Winona.
Sorry, but did you know that Gacked makes video game videos for Nestle? For their YouTube channel. It's like PewDiePie, but with Gacked.
It's like an 8-year-old's dream job.
I'm so serious. And then it's like, no. And then before we were talking about like, we James and I were talking about how he rehashes a lot of his old music when because he's on Nestle now, and we don't think he gets as much help with writing his music as much anymore, or something like that. Something along those lines of not having the same resources. So he's been like rearranging and rewriting lyrics to some songs, and you can like 100% tell what song he took it from. And then there's that song that he had like, where you, Jeff, you pointed out that like he kind of took a lot of influence from Wagaki Band.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Ghost. No, it was the influence of Ghost and Wagaki Band.
Yeah.
Pulling my strings. It was pulling my strings.
Yeah, so he literally took Ghost and was like, let me throw Wagaki Band in there instead of putting robots, because that would be too obvious.
Yes, that's exactly what it was. And you know what? I still listen to it.
There was another song. There's a song he released. I forgot what it was called, where it was definitely End of Silence. Like, it was a total rehash of the End of Silence. And I sat there and I listened to it and I'm like, dude, you aren't fooling anybody. It was a song that had Yo-Yo in there. And I was just like, yo, man, this is not as well played out as you thought it was.
Well, he kind of reminds you of like some of those bands that reunite and they just go tour and they never re-release any. I mean, they don't have any new material. It's just like,
it's not even like that. It's that Gact tries to release new material, like play it off as completely new material, but it's not.
I love how I tried to steer us away from like talking shit about more artists. But
let's steer away from
all
it.
right, so again, the fact that we can do this without without having to worry about, is this gonna negatively affect a reputation or something like that. It's like, no, the scene's doing so well that it's like we're finally in the position we want to be in, which is like what we say shouldn't like matter to an artist.
It
to
really
the point.
shouldn't matter.
Really, like at all. Like we're just here providing opinions and reporting news and giving reviews for people that are interested, but like, I would never want us to ever be in a position where I kind of felt like the scene was a few years ago, where it was like, we were worried if we reviewed a band's album poorly that it would like really reflect badly on them. And I know it's the case, like reflect badly as in like it would affect like their progress or something like that. So
yeah, like I want to just like step in and say real quick before we get like people who are like, no man, Gact's music is like awesome. Like it is good. It's really good. But I've been following Gact since I was like 11. So I can like point out like I was a hardcore fan. So I could like definitely nitpick each song and tell which song was from which writing he did and whatnot. So
yeah, and he doesn't care
good,
what we think.
He doesn't care. No, not him. It's his followers.
Oh, you think they care?
Attack us.
Don't you remember when I said the one new Alice 9 before they like left Major was bad, and I got like flamed so hard?
Yeah, not only that, like there are people in the industry who would so like defend him to the death. So like I just want to say, I get it. I like Gact too, but I just want to say that I know I can tell. I can tell what's going down right now.
When no one knows, you aren't sneaking it past her.
Yeah, I may not follow all the new bands these days, but hey, I know what's going down.
Okay. So, in conclusion, Visual K is very much alive and well. And
yes.
We're very glad about that, because that means that we can like vent a little bit about things that bother us freely.
Yes,
and
very much.
Definitely please check out James's articles for his top 30 albums 2016, 2015, all of them, because they've all been really great, very enlightening. So I know James has to go, pretty much right about now. So but thanks a bunch, James, and take it easy, man.
Yeah, catch you cool cats next week.
All right,
yeah.
Sounds good.
See you, James.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, now that it's just me and Winona, we're going to move on to our final topic, which is the Gazette. So the Gazette put out their World Tour documentary for Dogmatic Trois, earlier this year. And we thought this would be a good time to just kind of, it's available on iTunes and, I'm assuming everywhere now. And we just thought it would be a good time to go back and recap, what we thought of Project Dark Age, because you and I have both been following this pretty closely, been very involved in the entire event and everything. For those of you who are
ranting about the promotion.
Yeah, we ranted last week about the promotions. And so for those of you who weren't familiar or don't follow the Gazette a ton, if you're interested, Project Dark Age was their multi-movement, I guess 18-month like event that was basically a variety of different releases celebrating their 13th anniversary as a band.
What would they call? They called that the ominous year.
It was the ominous year. So in honor of that, they went to a very dark place, and basically the music they've been putting out over the course of this was combination of gothic metal, alternative metal, and I think that's and some metalcore as well. So it's a very bold direction, especially after Beautiful Deformity. Fairly controversial because the initial impression that I know a lot of fans got, because the first single they put out was called Ominous, and it's a very, very pretty, not really a ballad, but kind of slow, kind of heavy, very ominous, like the title says. A lot of industrial metal qualities to it, but it was a very gorgeous song, and so like the initial reaction was, it's like, oh my god, they're going back to Dim. We've been, there's people that we've been complaining since 2009 about Dim. It's going to be like Dim. We're going to have another Dim, and then it was just so not Dim.
And then we had asked them if they were ever going to go back to Dim, and I think Owie, wait, I'm going to try and pull up our interview, but I know that they generally said, yeah, we're never going to go back to Dim. We're never going back to any of our albums. We just want to keep moving forward as the Gazette.
So I feel like this was a fairly masterful move on their part. I have a lot of respect for the Gazette for taking this move. So they had Dogma, was their album that they put out. They had a single that came after that called Ugly, and then they had a single after that called Undying. They also went on a bunch of tours. They included a world tour where they made their US debuts. They put out a live DVD. They had some Heresy fan club, exclusive events and things like that. It's a lot of activity, a lot of content. So I would say I have a lot of respect for them for doing this beyond just, how the album, went and how the singles went and everything. More about kind of the balls that it took, so to speak, for a band like this to kind of do this. 'Cause the Gazette could have been in a really tricky situation where, for the longest time, everybody's been like, not everybody, but, a fairly vocal group of fans or listeners have been like, I really liked them the best back in Dim, 2009, the Dim album. And since then, they've done all kinds of experimentation with like pop and electronic music, starting off with Toxic, like we were talking about earlier, which was like, really focused on a lot of different singles that they had released over the years prior to that. And then started transitioning them into using pop sounds and like electronic music, but still experimenting with this like raw guitar sound at the same time. And then a year later had Division, which was this amazing album that like Winona and I both love, that is just like this. It's split,
so well conceptualized.
It's split 50-50 between, well-produced melodic rock that the Gazette is kind of known for, and then just this, fairly, pretty brutal, awesome, like, industrial metal, hard music that, played around with a lot of dubstep, like you have like Attitude. There's a song called Attitude that literally like the opening loop of the song is like somebody saying break dubstep, and
I had reviewed that album if anyone wants to look into our thoughts a bit further too.
Right.
Splitting it up in between, like I think it was Artery and Bane were the two parts of that of the limited edition release of that album.
Yeah, which is the way I totally recommend to listen to it, by the way. So, and then after that, they had the year after that they had Beautiful Deformity, which was like kind of like a giant recap of a lot of different sounds that the Gazette has done, sort of transitioning them almost back to the point where they were at Dim. You could literally see it. Like they started with a dubstep song, heavy, like the most heavily dubstep intensive song that they've ever done, Inside Beast, and then like ending with like To Dazzling Darkness and Coda. That was the first Gazette album that I reviewed. I loved Beautiful Deformity because if you enjoyed the Gazette, you'll probably enjoy Beautiful Deformity because it takes a lot of different sounds from like, everywhere, like across their history, and it mixes them with other sounds. So you have like Fadeless, which sounds like a mixture of like Leech from Dim and then Red from Toxic. Or you have like, I'm trying to think of another example off the top of my head, but like Karasu, which is a song which is the first track
Love that song.
their bassist wrote, Reita, and it's like a combination of Cockroach and the Social Riot Machines, or you have, so like stuff like that. So it was really interesting, and they got all 5 band members to write songs for it. So their drummer wrote a jazz rock song, which we haven't seen one of those in a while from the Gazette, so that was fun. But anyway, so after that, blitzkrieg of album releases, they went on a 2014 tour, called Saitegi, where they, they had 3 different segments that were combining, each segment was combining 2 of the albums, that had appeared back to back, in their, release history, as a band, and basically like a giant tour style recap of everything from Disorder, their first album, all the way up to, Division, their last album before Beautiful Deformity, which was more like a recap album.
And it's not unlike what Duran Gray is doing now with the mode of enter album name here,
Yeah.
So they're
really
just like going back over things.
Yeah. So that's the stage. And I only bring all that up because that is the stage that was set. And then they just plunged head first into this like really heavy, like massively overhauled sound where like the guitars were like distorted to infinity, and like Ruki's voice changed drastically. He's able to, it's gotten more melodic, and his clean vocals have gotten better over the years, but then he got this really savage scream that he's never ever had before, and like all this different, all these different elements, like from all the different years, they sort of collided together, but like in the experimental vein of just going as heavy as possible. So yeah, I think this was their way of just really driving home that it's like, this drowned out, I feel like for me, a lot of I don't know if they outdid some of their old stuff, like from Dim, but this really did a good job of drowning out, like, the focus on those songs.
Yeah, I think it really brought to attention, like, not just the past releases that they've had or like their history, but also the people that have helped them along the way of this project. Because when you look at like the behind the scenes videos, they really gave credit to the people who did their makeup and stuff. So it really looks at the whole thing like as a real group effort, from management to like the production team to the band themselves too.
Yes, very true. And I know we're both a big fan of the artist whose artwork they used for all their album covers, Tobias Kwan.
Fucking love Tobias Kwan.
The Motherlands Project, fucking amazing, art pieces. You can check them out. You'll notice they are literally what's used on the Dogma and Ugly and Undying album covers.
Especially with the nest head. The nest head was used for the Dogma album cover, and was also used and redrawn by a different artist for their World Tour documentary cover, because that's officially like the branded image of Dogma and this Dogmatic Twa too. Yeah.
So I feel like there's a certain segment of fans that is very quick to compare the Gazette's work to like Duran Gray, in a lot of cases. In terms of like, the Gazette did new metal, well, Duran Gray did new metal first, and the Gazette did this, well, Duran Gray did this first. I honestly think this is the first time that you could fairly equate the Gazette appropriating some of Duran Gray's music into their style, because that is actually what was happening on Dogma. So if you've been following the Gazette, you know that they really, for each of their albums, they like to appropriate a popular style of music into their core sound, which is like a mixture of like melodic and hard rock. They were kind of one of the pioneers of like that, or not the pioneers, but like they really helped codify like that, catchy anime opening-esque sound, but not necessarily make it exclusively related to like, something as sell-out-y as like as an anime opener song. They kind of normalized it a bit, and they started doing a lot of things they started normalizing a lot of things, like making a lot of things okay for other bands. And part of the way they did this was incorporating stuff like jazz rock or R&B and hip hop, and then with Dim, it was like a lot of Western, alternative metal and like, even some dark wave influences and stuff like that. Toxic was, a lot of pop and some electronic. Division was dubstep, a variety of different types of EDM, and stuff like that. So Dogma was focusing on, it had a gothic metal theme, but really it was focusing on metal in general, so it picked like a lot of, what you would consider the pop or popular, genres of metal. So you had like metalcore and you had alternative metal, dominating a lot of the album. You also had, a lot of other metal influences, sub influences, and one of those was a bit of avant-garde metal that was very reminiscent of Duran Gray. So this is the first time, I think, like in my opinion, this is the first time where it's really valid that it's like this was the Gazette, and I think correctly appropriating some stuff from bands like Duran Gray at the same time as they appropriated stuff from bands like Slipknot, or as they appropriated from bands like, insert metalcore band here, and stuff like that. I feel like in the past when it's been like, oh, well, the Duran Gray did new metal first, it's like, well, Korn did new metal first, or, this American band did new metal first that Duran Gray, played around with. Duran Gray blazed the trail for it for, J-Rock and Visual K. And then when the Gazette came along, they, in a lot of cases, they would normalize it. So,
because they're so popular. Like there's all these Visual K bands that name the Gazette as an influencer, as opposed to, like Duran Gray, which is kind of funny when you think about it.
And a lot of people put them against each other. I think they work best together. Like I love both. Like I love Duran Gray. I love the Gazette. I got into Duran Gray later, but I was able to get into Duran Gray and a lot of other bands in part because of the Gazette. Because the Gazette is like a very good starting point to like get into all kinds of different genres. Like I directly credit the Gazette with getting me into EDM, for example, or even they even had an influence in getting me more into hip hop. But they work really well together because Duran Gray is a kind of band that's really not afraid to try anything and like completely, like something, a lot of times. I don't know about in the past, but lately they've been doing things that are like completely brand new, and introducing like these completely new ideas like RK. Like I loved RK. I reviewed that album.
I think it's in part because like, in the past, Kyo would do so much screaming, and because of like the limitations that he has on his voice now, I think now they're like trying to explore the extent that they can really like continue to make music without pushing Kyo too far. Yeah. And then Tsukakyo is like another way for him to continue to explore that outside of Duran Gray too.
Yeah. But even like their older stuff, like they may not have been the first band to try new metal. They're not the first band to have, I'm speaking on a global level, to do, progressive metal. They're not the first band to do extreme metal going chronologically there. But in a lot of ways, they were one of the first Visual K bands. And they were the first, to do like a Visual K take on it. But a lot of bands, and a lot of people that are influenced by, larger bands, they'll admire Duran Gray for that. But like my view is that it's not to the point where a lot of other artists feel confident that this is something that could be done by other bands besides Duran Gray. And a lot of times that's where you have the Gazette a few years later coming in and doing new metal or doing, they've never done extreme metal, but they've done metalcore recently. They've done, even some of the avant-garde stuff that you would attribute like exclusively to Duran Gray, they did a little bit of that in some of their albums. I would consider Wasteland and Grudge off of Dogma to be very derived from Duran Gray, but in a more digestible format, maybe. So it's really interesting actually watching them work together, because Duran Gray is like the dreamer, and then the Gazette is like the one that is like, being like, hey, it's okay to do this.
Yeah. Dream.
Yeah. So I actually really hope, I think the best thing you can do is really like be open-minded about both bands and get into them like that, because like when you see how they play off of each other, so to speak, or especially like how the Gazette plays off of, things that Duran Gray has like dug up and things like that, it's like, it's a really powerful machine. And I think those two directly, working like that, like have contributed to like so much of like the freedom of experimentation that's inside of Visual K. But you know, what were your thoughts? I've rambled for long enough, but what were your thoughts on all this, Winona?
On Dogma?
Yeah, Dogma.
No, I just completely agree on everything you said too. Like, I think you really covered all the bases of my own personal thoughts on it. But on the tour, I know that the Gazette had not visited North America before at all, and so that's why it was like this particular world tour was such a big deal for a lot of people, especially when it was like their 13th anniversary, and they really wanted to make a whole thing about it. Like there's no doubt that they had been trying to come to North America like for a while, but they just couldn't find the right promoter. And at this point, they got booked by APA agency, I think it was, and they managed to come over. They managed to perform in front of their fans, and let's be honest, everyone went insane when they came over. Like as soon as they hit the States, everyone like made a point to go, no matter what. And the fact that they had put in as much time as they did into this project, it really made it feel like this was their first world tour, even though it wasn't. Like the fact that they had included North America this time and they had managed to actually tour like almost all the continents, it really made it feel like truly a world tour by bringing the US into it all.
Yeah.
And I think that because they visited the States this time, it almost is like a completely new beginning, and it really like made the band realize like they have so many more fans that they don't know about.
Yeah.
Like, they knew they had the fans, but they had no idea until they came to the States. And like, I know I rant and rave about the promotion. Like, I don't blame AEG Live for whatever happened, but like, it's just that like they could have had an even more like awesome experience of it all if they had sold out all of the venues, because they definitely should have, because so many people were excited for them to come. But there's no doubt that this would have been like promoted by their fans alone if everybody knew properly, you know?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I would say one thing that I noticed, and I talked about this in my live report of the NYC show, was that one thing I noticed at the show that I was at was, you know, it was such a star-studded set list, so to speak. Like all,
it definitely was.
There was all the hits or whatever, you know, so to speak. But even like a lot of the fan favorites and the things that the tracks that really carried them during this were or like really carried the concert were a lot of stuff from Toxic and Division, and I wasn't completely expecting that. But it wasn't.
You keep going. I'll
yeah, sure. So it wasn't, and it's not because it's like, oh, those tracks are better, but they have been made better by the Gazette's new sound in a lot of ways. Because Toxic, you know, and Division. So like you had Toxic that was experimenting with very crunchy guitars, like very, very raw guitar sound, in spite of the fact that they were doing a lot of, you know, pop and some electronic experimentation. And then Division had a really high, you know, production quality. The Project Dark Age sound over the course of that movement, by the time you got to the last single, it was a combination of both of those. So it was the guitars were like crunched up to the max, you know, but they were very well produced at the same time. Like they had the right smooth overlay, I guess, to the crunchiness, if that makes sense. That they could hit really hard and then pull back, you know, as soon as they wanted to and stuff like that. And so then seeing all of the songs being reperformed like that, and then with on top of Ruki's like improved, you know, vocals and stuff like that, like that really like was like a big upgrade for like some of their songs that they previously experimented with. So that's part of the reason why like I personally am like really pushing for them to like, you know, maybe try like the newer, crazier combination of like, you know, last time it was melodic rock, hard rock with electronic music. But with Project Dark Age, the Gazette finally brought out this hidden third pillar that they've always had of their music that's never really been acknowledged, which is that it's melodic rock, it's hard rock, but there's a lot of alternative metal in all of the Gazette's albums. And so I want to see. I want it. What do I want it? I want to see like alt metal and electronic music. And all right. So before I start drooling all over, what I think they should do next.
Okay. I have two things to interject. I guess I should go off of like how you're talking about their different music styles and what you really want. I finally pulled up our interview with the Gazette. It was an email interview, just so everyone knows. It was definitely an email interview. There was some kind of post out there on the Japanese internets where they were like, is this the same interview as all the other websites? And no, it's not, but okay. Because it came out around the same time. But I know a lot of people, we were talking about how a lot of people really wanted them to come back to DIM, and you were talking about how you really want them to, experiment with other styles. And I'm sure they'll get around to experimenting with EDM, but the Gazette's whole thing, it looks like, is that they just don't do everything that their fans request of them, because if they did, Rookie said, and I quote, we would have resigned as a band a long time ago.
Right.
So I'm just like, okay. Yeah. And he's like, it's not that it's the same as DIM, because both DIM and Dogma are just a single part of who we are. And like, Aoi is like, if a theater company always did the same musical for many years, would everyone keep going over and over to see them? And they just want to keep things changed up. So I'm sure eventually they'll like turn around to the EDM, because Rookie's like a huge fan of Daft Punk, and like it's just a matter of time, Yeah. But for the live set lists, Aoi had said, like, everyone, it's so funny because Aoi gave like the most descript answers of everyone in this interview. But Aoi had said that they had put up a survey on Twitter and based their set lists on people's responses in the survey.
Oh, okay.
Like people, like we had asked if they were going to perform stuff for like hardcore fans like Linda and stuff like that, but he said that didn't really show up on the survey they had put up. So that's primarily why it wasn't really played. Stuff like Cockroach, of course, showed up, So, yeah.
Oh, okay. And if you're following the Gazette for this long, it's very similar to like following, maybe to a lesser degree, but like it's kind of like following Miyavi for this long. You just kind of, you just kind of know to set like your personal wants and dreams aside, and just kind of keep keep an open mind about like whatever they're gonna do next.
Especially with Miyavi, yes.
Yeah, especially with Miyavi, but also with the Gazette. But what's interesting about the Gazette is, contrary to an artist like Miyavi, is that the Gazette will internalize a lot of the things that they have played with. For example, to this day, they still use R&B female R&B backing vocals, and they started that back in
Stacked Rubbish.
Yeah, and even a little bit on Nil and in like Bathroom and stuff. But they really codified it. They really codified it on Stacked Rubbish, but they've been using that to this day. Dogma has dubstep in it. Dogma has a dubstep intro.
Yeah, they are a good example of a band that perfects their craft. Like they take everything that they've learned over time, and they definitely like rehash whatever they liked and keep using it over and over, but they fine tune it so that it works specifically for the sound that they're going for, which is something really interesting.
Yeah, and like, more examples of that are like Ugly is got heavy use of drum and bass in it, in between breakdowns, and even Undying, which is like a very heavy, very clearly metalcore inspired song with some gothic metal backing sounds. The chorus is like a Gazette power ballad, So that's always nice that they'll pick that stuff up and they'll keep it in there. So so what are our bets moving forward on what the next style is? Is it Osharike? Is it going to be like,
I think it's going to be more likely EDM, and then they go into the Osharike.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that is more of a natural transition. You just kind of you go from wub 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 to
wub wub. Yeah. God, I don't know about the colors though. That's gonna be hard, man. I imagine they're gonna stick with like a dark color scale, like still like keep that nice color palette nice and dark, but that the songs are gonna be like opposite of the image.
That would be interesting.
I want to see that. I want to see the Gazette do Osharike.
I had showed the Gazette to a a girl I was dating at one point, and she asked me like a hypothetical that was like, what would you do if the Gazette showed up one day and they were completely different, like they were wearing like preppy outfits or something like that.
No.
And we're not dating anymore, so
What would you do if they were frat guys?
Yeah.
Basically what she was saying.
no, I'm just kidding. That's not why. Okay. But
Wow, so shallow, Jeff. No.
yeah. So be careful what you say about my Visual K bands when you're.
No.
Yeah. No. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for this podcast.
Oh boy, we're finally at the end. It's been 3 hours.
It's not been 3 hours. Don't say that.
Not after you edit it.
This has been a solid hour and a half.
We've been solidly doing this from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m., guys.
Yeah,
just for the sake of, so you know how dedicated we are to this.
Boo-hoo, it's our first podcast and our second podcast, and we're already whining about it. Wah. Do you know what these other podcasts do? They pay people to, produce everything for them.
That's kind of what every other media does in general, and we're sitting here nah, we can do it for free.
I don't think they actually do pay people. I think they just work harder than I'm willing to at podcasting.
Oh no. Well, I like the conversations we have. So
yes,
there you have it.
Well, there you go. So make sure to check out our content on vkhpress.com and
vkh-press.com.
VKH- Shit. All right, let me try that again. It's a hyphen though, right? Technically?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So make sure to check out our content at vkh-press.com. Got all kinds of stuff, news, reviews, interviews, live reports, stuff like that. Winona, do you want people to follow you on Twitter?
Oh boy. Sure. If you want to know what my face looks like, you can follow VKH on Twitter and then follow me subsequently as a result of you choosing to follow
Yes,
VKH.
please follow us on Twitter. We're at VKH Official.
VKH_official.
VKH_official.
Jeff is missing all these particles.
I'm missing all of them. We're on Facebook as VKH Press. That's a great way, if you're into the Facebook newsfeed, to get, all of our stuff, because we will all the articles we post, they go up on Facebook, they go up on Twitter. We're also on Instagram as well. So
yes,
you can follow me at, I will be changing my Twitter handle to something and I'll put it in here. Hey guys, it's Jeff from the future. I solved my identity crisis on Twitter. My Twitter handle is now the only real Jeff. Okay, back to the show. Because right now I'm not very active on Twitter, but it's like one of my New Year's resolutions. Some people like to, for their New Year's resolutions, they like to be like, engage less on social media. Got it. I need more.
you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at The Real Winona. I'm on Twitter about as often as anybody else, which is probably not very much, but I definitely talk me up some.
There goes our Twitter sponsorship.
No, stop. No, I don't. I just always tweet about shit like anime, like Samurai Jack and stuff like that. I really just, all I do is just vent about things like how Samurai Jack needs better cliffhangers. And they responded with a literal cliffhanger at the end of the recent episode. I was like, oh snap, all right, that's cool.
Yeah. My Twitter is probably gonna be a strange hybrid of like J-rock music and then like software development related
just
stuff.
Just make it Jeffy Jeff. Just make it Jeffy Jeff.
It's probably gonna be Jeffer Bear because that's what it was in the past.
Jeffer Bear.
Yeah.
Just make it something with your name and then leave J-rock out of it.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's how it's got to be because I like. I'm looking at my tweets. My last tweet was on March 10th, which is "Can't stop listening to Orcalade." This is
job.
some premium Nagoya K music right here. I'm all about it. Hashtag Visual K.
Let me see what my last tweet was. I know it was last night.
we'll keep it up. That keep in mind that the one before that was on February 13th, and it was, did you know you can save 50% or more on Valentine's Day by switching to single?
Oh my god.
Maybe you shouldn't follow me.
I don't even know, man. You download a shit ton of dank memes. I don't know how many of those memes make it to the outside social media.
Oh, I haven't started that yet. But.
Oh no, please don't. Nah. Like my last tweet was a retweet from Matt Bailey, who's an artist, and he was email time, and it's like a gif of like the hand turning into a bunch of extended tiny fingers and typing really quickly, because that's me when I send emails.
Okay, so regardless of how you feel about our weird social media shit, like definitely, check out VKH Press online, vkh-press.com, and on Facebook and Twitter, because we've got some great, awesome, exclusive stuff that comes up all the time. And yeah, so with all that in mind, thank you very much, Winona. Special thanks to James as well.
Yes.
I'm Jeff DeWitt.
Thank you, Jeff, for all your hard work.
Thank you. Now I'm off to go learn how Audacity works. So,
Okay.
so we will.
Keep in mind, this is a program, guys.
So we'll see you guys next week, or month, or year. See ya.
Or whenever we find time.
All right. Bye.
Why am I doing this? All that's left